Now, Prince William and Princess Catherine have celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary during a break in Scotland. Look, I can't believe it's been 14 years.
Me
but
neither.
That must have been very special.
Oh, absolutely. And Scotland is special for them. One, because this is where they met. They were at the University of St Andrews in Scotland. So it's sentimental for them. And they were there for a 2-day visit, and they visited the Isle of Mull. And this was a place on the Scottish coast where they did go when they were first dating. I don't even know if they were dating yet. I think they were just friends at that point.
Right.
So it's very special and very sentimental, and yeah, just lovely. But as you said, it's can't believe it's been 14 years since that amazing royal wedding at Westminster
Wasn't
Abbey.
it incredible? I know, it brings
was.
back so many memories. Everyone here in Australia was celebrating or hosting their own royal wedding parties to mark the occasion. But 14 years, it's great to see them going strong. Prince Andrew, he's facing more controversy after the BBC revealed fresh revelations about Andrew's financial dealings. What was the biggest takeaway from the BBC report?
Yes, so this was a report that appeared in the BBC earlier this week, and it was basically to do with Pitchett Palace, which was, as royal sort of watchers will probably remember, Pitchett Palace was is almost like a Shark Tank style show, but it wasn't a show, it was a presentation at the palace where Prince Andrew would basically invite investors to meet with young entrepreneurs and business people, and it was sort of an opportunity to network. So, I think it was something at the time that was considered quite a positive thing that Andrew was doing as a working royal, and he sort of had these contacts that he gleaned from that role, and it was valuable in a way, and it was, I guess, his personal, venture. And so after he was stripped, or I should say, stepped back from royal life after the notorious Newsnight interview, the ownership of that Pitchett Palace kind of venture was transferred to a man named Doug Barrowman, who is a very high-profile British millionaire and quite controversial because there's been allegedly allegations that he was involved in perhaps some kind of tax avoidance schemes. So quite a controversial figure at the moment. But basically the takeaway from this whole thing is that Andrew's finances are murky. It's very unclear where his wealth is coming from. How is he funding Royal Lodge? Like, we know that, King Charles is not paying for the property. So they've managed to hang in there. We've been talking about it on this show now for over a year. They haven't been evicted. They've managed to stay there. So they are funding it. And we know that it's multi-million pounds every year to pay for that property. So it's very unclear, but I've heard from a source, which I can't really go too much into, that there's a lot more to come about Andrew's finances. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, looking forward to hearing more, Riley. Now, heartbreaking new details have emerged about the shocking death of Prince Andrew's accuser, Virginia Giuffre.
Yeah.
What have former neighbours and friends had to say about her passing?
Look, this is just such a tragic case. Virginia Giuffre she showed so much bravery in her life.
Absolutely.
She spoke out against Jeffrey Epstein and I guess Prince Andrew and the British establishment in a way, which took amazing courage and bravery. And I think people don't credit her. I think people focus on the financial aspect of her deal with Prince Andrew and the settlement. But, her bravery and her coming forward, that inspired other people who were victims of Jeffrey Epstein and these awful people to come forward. And I think that she was a very courageous person. And it's so sad to know that, she's taken her own life. In Australia, of all places, Australia was a haven for her. She came here with her husband, Robert Giuffre, after she escaped, the clutches of Epstein, and this was her haven. She rebuilt her life here. She lived at times in Queensland, in New South Wales, and finally in Western Australia. And friends and neighbours have talked about, what an amazing woman she was. She changed her name. They knew her under different names. One of them was Jenna. And she was a normal mum. She was just a person that was, had gone through these sort of awful and dark and kind of extraordinary circumstances, and she really rallied. So it's absolutely heartbreaking. There was a note that allegedly Virginia wrote that her sister-in-law has released, and it kind of just was somber. It said, it talked about fighting for women, fighting for victims of trafficking. And I hope that's her legacy, and I hope that people don't take this path of conspiracy, because at the end of the day, she was a brave woman who lived in very kind of exceptional circumstances.
Absolutely, and she should be remembered for her courage and her bravery and the devastating news coming out of Australia. Finally, King Charles has opened up about his cancer diagnosis, saying that it can be daunting and at times frightening experiencing for those living with the illness. What else did King Charles have to say?
Yeah, this was a really heartwarming speech by the King. It was really interesting language, to have a monarch talking about, he said he feels like he became a statistic because, cancer touches the lives of almost everyone at some point, whether personally or through family and friends. And he described himself in that way. And I thought that was very interesting language to have a monarch, which, traditionally is this person who is on a very kind of, ornamental pedestal. To be talking about being a statistic, I thought was very kind of interesting language. That's a real change. I don't think Queen Elizabeth would have referred to herself in that kind of context. But it was a very, sad in a way because he didn't really go into perhaps prognosis or, what stage he's at in his cancer battle, which I think people can make their own conclusions about. But as far as we know, he's in good spirits. The speech was something where he was able to reach out and thank people in the community, cancer sufferers, people in the NHS, people in the healthcare system that have supported him and support others. And he said that really it's the best of humanity when you look at how people look after each other when things like this happen. So
and he's absolutely right.
He is, yeah.
Riley Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.